Alrighty, welcome to another quick episode of Esoteric Beat. So I'm in crunch mode for getting my chapter written, and I've unfortunately had to take another extension. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the trouble I'm having, getting finished, and hopefully this will be helpful for anybody who's interested in, writing the religious studies paper, writing the esoteric studies paper. Um, and so I want to talk tonight, and I'm going to make it just a quick one because I'm low on gas. I want to talk tonight about the problem that I've been having where I keep tripping myself up, kind of like trying to I keep trying to say the same things, but I haven't quite figured out how to say them, you know. So my plan is that I'm going to need to go back and all this stuff that I keep kind of trying to interpolate as I explain the lectures, I need to say that kind of up at the head. I need to say that up top. And hopefully, once I've got that sorted out, then I'll be able to just sort of use my materials. I'm not always going to be kind of unsure how to comment, what to explain. Um, so I decided, I need to do a paragraph about science and the reason why Terence McKenna has a bone to pick with science, right? Because as I was saying, I keep tripping myself up, like trying to kind of like say the thing about science again. But if I'd set it up top, then it would be done, and I could just be kind of referring back to it. Um, and so, what is the problem with science that is the reason that Terence McKenna is looking to alchemy? Well, science does not match human values, especially the values of human decency. And there's a place in the lectures where McKenna is talking about how science doesn't reflect human values. It's sort of more interested in imperial ambitions or capitalist ambitions, right? It's not about the individual. It's about securing value for shareholders, right? And people are getting ground under the gears, and the planet's getting destroyed, right? And Terence McKenna connects this to ego, and he says, look, science and like our kind of social structures are giving permission to the like worst people, the most egotistical people, gives permission to this idea that we can just sort of like take from the planet, um, this like instrumental attitude. So McKenna boils it all down, and I think I want to do an extra paragraph about Descartes in particular. This is something that I think McKenna may have taken from Yeats, because Francis Yates uses Descartes as sort of the emblem, pun intended, of the turn to mechanism that happens in the early modern period with the scientific revolution. And so I think that what I'm going to do, and my strategy for resolving this perplexity, for resolving this tripping up that's happening, is going to be I'm going to go through the lectures one more time and sort of pull out. I'm just going to word search all the places, or look through my notes, all the places where he talks about Descartes, and actually quote all that stuff, quote it up front, get it out of the way. And also, I'm going to put up top in the historiography section, in the scholarly throat clearing part, where I'm talking about all the context of like scholarly approaches to alchemy and where McKenna fits and all that. There are some bits, and I want to make sure to include Terence's words where he says what alchemy is, right? And then go from there. It's not going to be a wasted quote. It's not going to be like I'm putting out a bunch of paragraphs into my thing and not breaking it down. And so when Terence talks about how alchemists believe that metals were growing in the earth, right? The theory of lead into gold is that lead is like a less perfect metal. It's less developed, less mature, and it's going to grow into gold in the earth eventually. So what the alchemist is just doing is using heat to kind of like speed up the process in their lab. One way that it's looked at is creating an artificial womb, although I'm not sure if McKenna is hip to that. Um, when McKenna says this, this is something that is uncontroversial according to the new historiography of alchemy. Even the strictest interpreters of alchemy are going to say, yeah, McKenna's got the theory right here. When he says alchemy is all basically Gnosticism and Hermeticism, their hairs are going to stand on end, because that's not really defensible, right? There's many alchemies, some of which are Hermetic. So I definitely want to quote the bit where McKenna says, I studied with Feyerabend, who wrote this famous Against Method, right? And McKenna quotes Feyerabend as saying, well, we've discovered what this truth thing is. Now, what's the big deal about it, right? And science and its pursuit of truth has sort of lost touch with human values. And, in terms of my argument, I mean, Feyerabend is a serious critic of the history of science, right? So when McKenna is doing a critique of science, it's an inside baseball sort of a critique. It's a loving critique, And what's the reason we're looking to alchemy is that, well, he sees alchemy as proto-science, right? It's the thing that led to the development of science, and he's picking up on Francis Yates to make this argument, right? But the reason that he's trying to make alchemy available as a body of literature to his audience, is not, he doesn't have a spiritual motivation. He's not trying to teach people how to have these spiritual experiences in the way that a spiritual alchemist might. But rather, he has a kind of metaphysical or ontological concern where he sees alchemy as a legitimate form of inquiry, this wonder-driven, open-minded form of inquiry that we can distinguish from the capitalistic Protestant sort of patriarchal, logic-chopping, prohibitionist, mechanistic form of science that he associates with constipated reason. I'm going to use this word constipated reason because that way I can refer back to the constipated reasoning thing that I established in an early chapter without tripping myself up, right? So he does, I mean, this is an esoteric studies paper, a religious studies paper. He is using alchemy to sort of explain and defend psychedelic shamanism, right? And there's all kinds of places where the alchemical tradition sort of, he says at one point, this gives permission to be psychedelic, right? And so he's explaining why alchemy is psychedelic, but he also wants to go back to this turning point in Western metaphysics and ontology. He says that when he was a child playing with mercury, he hadn't yet imbibed the ontological presuppositions of Western Cartesian rationality, and he was making these amazing discoveries, and that's really the essence of alchemy for him, is this this process of wonder-driven inquiry. And so he wants to go back to the early modern period where science took this turn and say, well, we can go back to this. If we're going to create a science that is vitalistic, that's going to take into account the discovery through psychedelic shamanism, or the rediscovery, because he thinks it's an archaic survival, the rediscovery of a living nature. And how are we going to do science based on this rediscovery of a living nature? And, that's why he connects alchemy with Sheldrake, right? The vitalism of alchemy, and also the Elan Vital of Henri Bergson. And I really wish McKenna was still around so that we could talk about that book by James Burton on Henri Bergson. Reminds me I need to contact Ralph Abraham, who I once had a nice lunch with, Bill Cyril, who was a friend of PKD's. And Ralph Abraham told me that he and Terence McKenna had a Philip K. Dick reading group, like a book club. So I really want to interview Ralph Abraham about his buddy Terence McKenna and their PKD reading club. So I managed to bring this in under 10 minutes. Thanks to everybody who has given me feedback. I really appreciate those of you who have read my chicken scratch. I've got 7,000 words up right now, and it's still so poorly digested. I really appreciate people listening to my rants and reading my pros. And so thanks a lot. Send your feedback, ted.hand@gmail.com. I am available for tarot readings and esoteric studies coaching sessions. Hit me up. Thanks for watching. Stay curious.